What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Twin Wrestle Pod. Today's video, we're going to talk about AEW Dynamite Blood and Guts. We're going to talk specifically about the two Blood and Guts cage matches, the one for the men's and the one for the women's. The show overall was a decent, really good show on Dynamite standards. The crowd was very hot. Some crazy, brutal spots we're going to jump into in a minute here. So, if you're looking forward to that, hit that thumbs up down below. Subscribe to the channel and comment your thoughts on Blood and Guts below. Blood and Guts was brutal. Crazy spot after crazy spot. Spots in each of these matches. I'm not going to go over on each spot verbatim. I'm just going to list down some points and stuff and what I enjoyed about it and what I disliked and the stuff that wasn't needed. So let's jump into it. The show kicked off with the women's Blood and Guts match. So it's a six women on each team. Team Monet, pretty much, versus Team Statlander, if you will. Willow, Nightingale, and Sky Blue started off the match. And at the beginning of this matchup, right, they were going back and forth. And Sky Blue, out of the blue, no pun intended, comes out busted. I'm talking about not as bad as Eddie Guerrero did in 2005. Not as bad there, but close to it, okay? And it was off one of the weakest maneuvers I've ever seen for her to get busted open. Like, Willow just threw her into the cage while she was on top of the turnbuckles, and that warranted that much of a gusher, I guess. She hit an artery or something, because she was just, blood was just, as Jim Ross would say, crimson red, a crimson mask. And that was the fucking theme for both matches, pretty much. We're going to jump into it. So she's already bleeding buckets at this point. Our next entry in the matchup is Julia Hart. She entered, and she and Sky Blue double teamed Willow. Into the next entrant, Harley Cameron came in and evened the odds. She came out with a chair, so this is the first person to introduce a weapon, I believe. No, Sky Blue introduced like a barbed wire kendo stick at the beginning. She didn't really use it as much because she got busted open. So Harley Cameron came out there with a steel chair, threw it at the face of Sky Blue, and her and Willow evened the odds and double teamed Julia to take us into our first break. Willow with a shout out to Brody King, hit a sunset flip into the corner onto Sky Blue. Nothing really happened during the break. I was able to see the HBO match part of this show. Nothing really happened here. It was just a standard matchup between Harley Cameron, Willow, and Sky Blue and Julia Hart at this point. So we come back from break, and Tekla entered the matchup. She did a couple cool maneuvers, couple cool counters. And she crossbodied someone, I think it was Willow. And she, at the point, after she had everybody down, she took a belt from her boot and started leveling everybody from Willow to Harley Cameron. She was really going in on Harley Cameron at that point with the belt. Then we get our next entrant, which was Jamie Hayter, who had a lot of history with Tekla. Tekla was the woman who debuted and attacked Jamie Hayter from behind, thus putting her on the shelf for about a month. So this rivalry has been going head to head since probably about before the summer. But Jamie Hayter came out there with a bag of thumbtacks, and she goes to hit Sky Blue with the thumbtacks, and the thumbtacks just exploded. Like, they just landed into the corner outside the ring. So she really couldn't use the thumbtacks to the effectiveness. She picked up the barbed wire kendo stick, hit everyone in the ring with it, and at a point she hit Tekla with the barbed wire kendo stick. She actually ripped some flesh off the back of Tekla, who had to go to the other ring and get checked on by the referee. So Jamie Hayter came in there at a bat out of hell. So at this point, the time intervals, they say at the beginning, like at the rules section, the time intervals are every 5 minutes, but I can swear the women in this matchup were entering probably like at a 2-minute pace, because someone would go in there and get like a big comeback moment, or they comeback moment as they enter the ring, get a lot of heat, and then the timer will start once everybody stopped, like kind of like how the Royal Rumble would be, right? So we pretty much got that. Then we got to our next entrant, which was Megan Bayne, she came there and cleared house, bro. She hit a double suplex on Willow and Harley, I believe. Then she just started leveling she was standing tall over everything. She had the bitch spot of the match pretty much. The bitch person spot, just leveling everyone in the matchup. As Megan Bayne is celebrating, Kris Statlander enters. She comes in with the championship belt still on her waist. She delivered a crossbody onto Megan Bayne, so sort of using the championship belt as a shield, no less, to deal extra damage to Megan Bayne. But there was a blunder at this point after Kris Statlander celebrated with the championship belt. Her and Willow came face to face, and like Sky Blue was behind him, and she pushed Willow into Kris Statlander, and Kris Statlander threw a clothesline, which you can look at it and tell like they didn't mean to do that, and like they was waiting on something. So they ran up and redid the spot. They was waiting on Megan Bayne to get into the picture because they redid the spot when Megan Bayne got into picture. So Megan Bayne and Sky Blue pushed both Kris Statlander and Willow together. They collided and they fell. This then brought out none other than 12 belts. Mercedes Moné came into the fray. She came out here with all of her championship belts on display. She came out just with the TBS championship alone, but all her other championships that she's won were laid out on a display table next to a bottle of champagne. She came in the ring and she started doing a flurry on every woman involved. We knew Mercedes is better than every woman in this matchup, and she showed it at this point. She then went outside before the cage closed. She went back outside, grabbed each one of her championship belts and gave them to one of her teammates so they can use the championship belts to whoop each lady in the matchup. Our next entrant was Mina Shirakawa, who came out with a barbed wire baseball bat. At this point, she comes in the ring, all the girls backing down, and this spot looked very weird. She threw the baseball bat to Megan Bayne, who just held it, and she drop kicked her, kind of like a Van Daminator, but it don't hit the same with the barbed wire baseball bat. So just me as watching it, I'm just like, it don't hit the same. But I get where she was going with that. And then they start balling into the other side of the ring, and at this point, this is where I noticed that Kris Statlander was busted open. I don't remember how she got busted open. I just didn't remember the spot. The camera just panned to her, and as she's helping one of her teammates, I think she was helping Mina at the point, and then she just comes up, she's bleeding. I said, what the hell happened? Excalibur made a reference on commentaries like, this is what Mercedes Moné wanted, was to weaken Statlander for a eventual match. Marina Shafir was next to enter the matchup. As she's making her way to the ringside, she gets to the ringside and Kris Statlander meets her. So she drags Kris Statlander outside of the cage, throws her into the barricade, and then she goes by the announcer side, reveals the bed of nails that they used at last year's Blood and Guts matchup that actually poked Kenny Omega. If you remember that matchup when it was Kenny Omega and them versus the Death Riders, she used that same bed of nails and she delivered like a pump kick to Kris Statlander, who landed graciously, by the way, which no fault there, onto the bed of nails. And there's this picture of her on the bed of nails, blood just pouring all over her body. It's crazy visual. At this point, Marina Shafir takes her boots off and gives Kris Statlander the finger, goes into the ringside to help her team, and they just dominate from that point on forward. Then we get Timeless, the final entrant into the match. Timeless Toni Storm, who has digs in her purse, brings out the pearls, grabs the bottle of wine and the bucket that's on the side where Mercedes belts is on the table, brings it to the ringside, and she uses the pearls on every woman involved. Megan Bayne no sells it, but Toni gets the upper hand on her. And then at a point in time in the matchup, Toni breaks the bottle of wine. She dips her hands into the bottle of the broken glass and uses it on all the women involved in the matchup. At this point, this is where Marina Shafir ended up being busted open. That's where I assume she had busted open from, since she was one of the people that Toni Storm leveled with her hands wrapped in glass. So that's where I can see she had busted open. Mercedes Moné, she gets in. She's reversing everything the other women are throwing. She has her hot spot of the match pretty much. She delivers everything. And then Harley Cameron comes out of the blue with Mini Moné. Mercedes goes to hit her. She ducks it and hits Mercedes with the puppet to reveal underneath the puppet brass knuckles. And what a move by Harley Cameron there. So after this spot, Tekla and Julia crawl through like these. There was like these spaces in that connected the cages. So Tekla is on one side, Julia's on the other side. They go out the ring. This is how they get outside of the ring, outside of the cage. So I'm not a big fan of it. I'll get to it. But they get outside the ring and go to the referee who has the key, who locked the key after Toni Storm came in to proceed with Blood and Guts being official. And they attack the referee, steal the key, go out, unlock the door, and this is procedure where all the women, the majority of the women, go out there. So I think you had Tekla, Jamie Hayter, Julia. Chris Statlander eventually brings out Mercedes Moné out there, so them two are out there. And Tekla spears Jamie Hayter. I forget who else was with her. I think it might have been Harley Cameron was out there with her as well. So Harley Cameron and Jamie Hayter, yeah, both speared outside the ring. Then Mercedes is trying to escape Toni Storm, so she's climbing up the side of the cage. Chris Statlander, excuse me, not Toni Storm, but Chris Statlander stops her and delivers a Samoan drop onto Mercedes Moné through the tables, through her belts, and that ends the night for both Mercedes Moné and Chris Statlander. So Chris Statlander got her upper comments on Mercedes Moné by delivering her through the table. Then we get to the finish of the match where Toni Storm introduced this mirror she grabbed from the side of the ring, brings it up, places it on Marina Shafir. She's about to go for the hip attack. She runs, Marina Shafir picks up the mirror and she just flings it at Toni Storm. Glass shatters everywhere. Mina at this point is checking on Toni Storm and she's busted open. So I'm like, what the hell? How did she get busted open? I do not know. I don't know the answers to these questions. And then Mina, she tried to get on Megan Bayne and try to choke her out. Marina Shafir, she stomps on the glass with her bare feet, stomps on Mina, grabs her, hip lock takeover, puts her in a chokehold, and like an arm triangle. And while she's in an arm triangle, Megan Bayne takes one of Mercedes Moné's championship belts and starts to whoop Mina Shirakawa like a dog. At this point, the remaining members of the team has Toni Storm hostage, and she watches while her teammate is getting whooped profusely with this championship, and she has no other choice but to surrender, leading to the heels winning the matchup. This was a very good matchup. The girls had a lot to prove in this match by this being the very first Blood and Guts for the women. Marina Shafir and Willow both competed in last year's Blood and Guts matchup, but this was the official one for the women and they had something to prove. Now we're going to quickly transition into the other Blood and Guts matchup. The men's, the Death Riders taking on the Conglomeration. Wheeler Yuta and Darby started this matchup, and the same thing happened here that happened in the women's matchup. Wheeler Yuta, he got drove into the cage, and then we come back to the camera shot and he's bleeding. I'm just like, we just had this same thing in a women's matchup. But okay, whatever. And the Conglomeration had the advantage. So Orange Cassidy came out there next. They double teamed Wheeler Yuta for a point in time, and this led into Daniel Garcia coming out there for the Death Riders. So it was tied up 2-2, and we have the two youngest member of the Death Riders, Wheeler Yuta and Daniel Garcia, versus Orange Cassidy and Darby Allin. This is where we got our first break into this matchup. Daniel Garcia and Wheeler Yuta took over the matchup during the break, and one spot that was kind of stupid, Darby doing a lot of stupid things in this matchup. He goes for a springboard coffin drop, but on Wheeler Yuta and Daniel Garcia, they just used the chain that was introduced into the matchup, and they just hit him with the chain as he sprung into them. It was kind of stupid by Darby, really it was. Then we come back from break, and Mark Briscoe is supposed to be the next entrant for the Conglomeration, but we get backstage and see Briscoe holding his ribs, and they're trying to get an update on the situation. Kyle O'Reilly and Roderick Strong come back there to the back and check on him, and Roderick Strong said he'd take his spot. So Roddy comes out there like a ball of fire. He lays out everybody, Garcia, and he lays out Yuta. Then this proceeds to bring out our next entrant, Claudio, who then threw Roddy into a chair, which was propped up on the corner, I guess, during a break, or maybe while they was doing something backstage with Mark Briscoe. Threw Roddy into the chair. This proceeded to bust Roddy open. But a cool spot I did enjoy, Claudio and Garcia gave Darby this cool looking double team move. So Garcia goes for an Indian death stretch, and as he reels back, he lets. Next up, we have Kyle O'Reilly come out there, and he gave a couple knee strikes, a couple counters to everyone involved. Then we went quickly to a break, and at the break, the Death Riders really took control. Just stalled time for a minute, catch their breath, and they took control of the matchup. Then we come back from break, and this is where everything starts to pick up. We have the next entrant, the leader of the Death Riders, Jon Moxley, who enters the fray. And at this point, the reaction from the crowd starts to rise because it's Jon Moxley. He's the most over guy in this entire matchup. He's the person everyone knows the most out of everyone. Claudio got a bit of a reaction, but Jon Moxley got the most reaction out of everyone involved in this matchup. Jon Moxley comes in there with a fork. He sees Kyle O'Reilly. He stabs Kyle O'Reilly multiple times in the head, and the camera pans away, so we know what happened there. We'll get to that in a second. He goes to Darby, puts Darby in a guillotine, a standing guillotine. He uses the knife to rake Darby's back multiple times. Then he gives Daniel Garcia a crack, and Garcia, he rates the knife. I don't know why I'm saying knife, but he rates the fork. A knife would be fucking brutal. That wouldn't be PG. He uses the fork to rake the back of Darby. And we pan over to Kyle O'Reilly. He is fucking drenched in blood. Moxley then used the remnants from the women's blood and guts match with that broken mirror. It was still at ringside, so he went out by the announcer's table, brought it into the ring, crumbled it up into itty bitty pieces, and then him and Daniel Garcia double team power drive Darby Allin on top of it, and Moxley slams Darby and he rates his back on the glass, bro. And the blood starts pouring from Darby's back from the broken glass his back just went through. Just ridiculous spot, bro. I just don't understand why they do half of the shit they do. Then the next entrant was supposed to be in the midst of this was Mark Briscoe. So we go to our next entrant, which is the Bastard Pac. He comes out there and he pretty much just helps maintain control. At this point, the Death Riders have the advantage, and the match has officially started because the referee bolted the doors. Then that proceeded to bring Mark Briscoe out there. He comes out of there with a toolbox and bolt cutters. So he goes out there, goes to the cage, cuts the lock off with the bolt cutters, throws the toolbox in the ring. Every teammate of his gets the tools out of there, whether it's a wrench or anything need to be used. They help defend up the Death Riders. Him opening that door with the bolt cutters allows everyone else to come out ringside. A lot of things happen after Mark Briscoe opened that cage, okay? So a bunch of wrestlers goes out. Darby goes out. Mark Briscoe goes out. Wheeler Yuta goes out. And I think Daniel Garcia goes out, right? So they bring out tables. And at this point, Mark Briscoe climbs up the top of the cage. And he's about to jump off the cage onto Daniel Garcia, who's laid out on the table. But Daniel Garcia moves out the way. And on the other side of the cage, Wheeler Yuta has climbed up. And he's up there face to face with Mark Briscoe. They hammer it out for a minute. Mark Briscoe hits him with a move. Then he tells Kyle O'Reilly below. Mark Briscoe grabs a rope from on top of the cage, brings it down with a grappling hook, right? And he tells Kyle O'Reilly, who is at ringside now, to set up these strategically placed steel chairs, puts him on a grapple, and he repels them up towards him on top of the cage. A lot of shit happened here. I'm not gonna go through verbatim everything that happened here. In my opinion, this stuff didn't really need to happen, if I'm being completely honest. Because then we go to a break, right? So Mark Briscoe is doing all this shit during the break. Repelling the chairs up there. And him and Wheeler Yuta are using chairs on top of the cage. So at this point, the match was getting a little long in the tooth for me personally. I just feel like they were just stalling for time and just doing all these spots that didn't need to be done. You already had enough ammunition, enough stuff in the ring, enough stuff at ringside to use to pad the time. So this is what they was doing, was padding the time with most of the stuff. So Wheeler Yuta hit Mark Briscoe with the steel chair, and we come back from break. Mark Briscoe's bleeding. I'm just like, bruh, he's bleeding. Then we pan the camera down. Moxley is bleeding. I'm like, how did Jon Moxley get busted up? Because the camera's not focused on them during the break. The camera's like at a far away view, so you ain't really paying attention to what Moxley's doing. You're paying attention to what Wheeler Yuta and Mark Briscoe are doing. So Moxley's busted open. Then Gabe Kidd comes out there, attacks Darby, drags him to the Titantron, and we get the spot of the match. So Pac is out there with Gabe Kidd. They bring Darby on top of the Titantron. These tables are set on the side. Gabe Kidd lights him on fire, and Pac military slams Darby onto the fire, and that renders Darby out of the matchup. And he still has some fire on him when he went through the table. Just a lot of unnecessary shit. Then we proceed to go to the finish, which, let's bring it home. This is one of the best finishes I've seen. Okay, the sequences that they did at a point in time during the break. Jon Moxley used a staple gun. I'm tired of the staple gun in AEW, but he uses it on Orange Cassidy. Orange Cassidy gets back in the ring. He halts up, breaks free from the staple gun. Orange punches all the Death Riders, and he delivered one final Orange punch to Jon Moxley. And Jon Moxley's on the other side of the ring with Kyle O'Reilly, and Kyle O'Reilly puts him in an ankle lock. Jon doesn't tap at first. He switches it, but being technical, as Kyle O'Reilly is, he switches it into another ankle lock. He sits down on it, and Moxley taps for the win for the conglomeration. And that is both Blood and Guts matches in a nutshell. Couple things I liked. I liked the finishes of both. Megan Bayne whipping Mina Shea Carver with the belt just for her tag team partner to scream, "I give up, I surrender," on behalf of our team, because she couldn't watch her teammate go through that much pain anymore. And for the men's, the sequences that we got that led to the finish of Moxley tapping out, great. All right, most of the things we didn't need in this match, and we know what comes with these matches, being that it is the AEW, being that they do blood all the time. But most of the unnecessary shit we didn't need, things I didn't like. Okay, the purpose of a Blood and Guts match is this giant cage that no one can get out of, right? Keep everything inside of the cage. It kind of gets silly like War Games when everybody brings in a weapon to use within the cage. Traditional War Games matches weren't like that in WCW. They didn't just bring out weapons. They were locked in the cage, and the feud was long enough to sell it the whole entire matchup. I hate the use of them bringing weapons in. Blood and Guts, they just did a lot of unnecessary spots. Everybody didn't need to be bleeding. It's at points in both men's and women's matches. I'm like, why is Mina Shea Carver bleeding? The person I think probably should have bleed didn't even bleed, which is Toni Storm, when she got the mirror through face first and face, like front face, just boom. She ate that mirror. She didn't get busted open. Why is Mina busted open? Okay, Mina Shea Carver didn't need to be busted open. Fucking Marina Shafir didn't need to be busted open. For the men's matches, Jon Moxley didn't need to be busted open, but I guess you had to get the finish because he was going to be involved in the finish, so it was reputable for him to be busted open. Mark Briscoe did not need to be busted open. Roderick Strong didn't need to be busted open. Like it was just so much unnecessary shit. Now everyone need to have blood to sell this match. The match sell on its own. And excessive use of staple guns and glass, like you get that in every big time pay-per-view match or big street fight type of deal with AEW all the time. We just need to lessen the use as much. Other than that, the show was good. It was a good show. So I would say go ahead and watch the women's match. The men's match was too long in my opinion, especially if you don't watch it with ads. It was just dragging because they just try to pad their runtime. And the Darby table spot was another spot that wasn't needed. But all in all, it was a good show. So I would say go ahead and watch Blood and Guts. But watch the women's match first because it did a lot for story. The men's did a lot with story in terms of the finish. But overall, everything in the women's match set up stories for the Adventure pay-per-view matches at Full Gear. AEW Blood and Guts was a brutal crazy masterpiece. Now go out and watch it. Peace out, y'all.